Today, we will temporarily step away from analyzing human behavior, from dissecting the brain, or diving into individual psychology as we usually do. Today, we are looking back at an event that happened 6 years ago, an event that fundamentally changed how humanity thinks, reacts, and exists in the modern world. The world had been running like a machine for 100 years without ever stopping until the moment it was forced to shut down. And when the noise of our entire civilization suddenly disappeared, we finally saw a truth we had ignored for decades. Humanity believed it was strong. Yet, a single invisible virus was enough to push the entire world back years in development. Economies that once grew steadily fell into recession. Megacities that never slept turned into silent landscape. The global supply chain, the system that kept the world moving, collapsed within weeks. Millions lost their jobs, millions of businesses vanished, and hundreds of millions were pushed back into poverty. But within that collapse, something unexpected happened. Humanity began to innovate faster than at any point in modern history. In just 2 years, we created technologies that normally would have taken a decade. We learned to adapt, restructure, and build a world completely different from the one we knew before the pandemic. 6 years later, COVID was not just a blow that brought humanity to its knees. It was the step back that set the stage for the greatest leap of the 21st century. And the real question now is this: if another pandemic emerges, will the world fall into chaos again like in 2020? Or are we finally strong enough to write a different story? When the pandemic erupted, the world was not facing just a health crisis. It was like a global earthquake, shattering systems we once believed were unshakable. And the damage COVID caused was so great that only 6 years later do we fully understand. The pandemic pushed humanity back at least 5 to 7 years in development. The first shock came from the global economy. In the first quarter of 2020, the GDP of nearly 90% of countries fell sharply, a figure unseen since the Great Depression of 1929. Even the most stable economies, the United States, Europe, Japan, could not escape recession. More than 114 million jobs vanished within months. Nations lost 3 to 15 years of accumulated growth, depending on how much they relied on global supply chains. Then came the supply chain, the system no one noticed until it collapsed. When China shut down, when ports clogged, when global transportation froze, the world suddenly realized the brutal truth. If even one link stopped working, everything from healthcare and technology to manufacturing and food would crumble. Car factories lacked chips, hospitals lacked protective equipment, tech companies lacked components. Items as simple as masks and gloves became strategic assets. 350 million people were pushed back into poverty, erasing more than a decade of progress. Middle-income nations, Indonesia, India, the Philippines, South Africa, Brazil, suffered the most. And the COVID generation, children and students forced to stop schooling for 1 to 3 years, became the group facing the longest-lasting consequences. Research shows that this educational disruption may reduce their lifetime earnings by 3–4%. The global healthcare system also revealed catastrophic weaknesses. Within months, hospitals in the US, the UK, and Italy collapsed under the strain. Doctors burned out. Medical supplies ran dangerously low. Even the strongest healthcare systems in the world could not withstand a prolonged wave, and the most dangerous damage did not come from the virus itself, but from the collapse of trust. When governments issued conflicting decisions, when international organizations argued, when social media was filled with misinformation, the world fell into deep division. Many studies show that social trust dropped sharply during the pandemic, and even after reopening, that fracture still has not healed. COVID did not just kill people. It killed the belief that the world was strong enough to protect itself. 6 years later, we can finally see the full scale of that damage. Economies pushed backward, societies fractured, systems shaken, and a civilization that once seemed unstoppable forced to pay the price with years of lost progress. But from that fractured ground, a different story began to emerge. Humanity was forced to change faster than at any moment in history. From the ruins of the pandemic, something almost paradoxical happened. Humanity innovated more in 24 months of COVID than in the previous 10 years combined. When the world was locked down and every system that depended on motion suddenly froze, humanity was left with only one choice: adapt or be eliminated. Before COVID, vaccine development took 10 to 15 years of research and approval. Yet, for the first time in history, humanity created a viable vaccine in just 326 days. This was not simply an achievement, it was a biotechnology revolution. mRNA technology did not just help fight COVID, it opened an era where vaccines can be programmed, created within weeks to counter any emerging variant. At the same time, artificial intelligence became the world's biological radar. Tasks that once required weeks, such as analyzing a new variant, could now be completed in hours. AI could identify outbreak clusters from airports, wastewater, or city data in real time. In the United Kingdom, the United States, in the UAE, AI is no longer merely a support tool. It has become a strategic layer of national defense. It was not only healthcare that transformed. The global economy reshaped itself. Remote work, once dismissed as unrealistic, became the dominant model for hundreds of millions of people. Corporations that previously rejected remote work were forced to adopt hybrid systems in a matter of months. Cloud infrastructure, cybersecurity, and collaboration platforms advanced 10 years in one. The knowledge economy became more global than ever. Meanwhile, robotics and automation surged because production could no longer depend entirely on human labor during lockdowns. Major nations accelerated robotization, built smart factories, and restructured supply chains to reduce dependency on any single country. The pandemic forced the world to shift from cost-optimized supply chains to resilient ones. In parallel, full-scale digitalization unfolded as a mandatory race. E-government, online courts, telehealth, nationwide online education, digital payments, fintech, and e-commerce all leaped forward at unprecedented speed. COVID set the world back 5 to 7 years, but it also pushed us forward 10 to 12 years in the most crucial areas. The pandemic was like a cold, ruthless hand, crushing fragile systems, yet that destruction allowed stronger, faster, smarter systems to emerge. And from those fractures, humanity entered a new era, an era of programmable medicine, AI-driven defense, robotics, and full digitalization. It was a leap that, without the pandemic, might have taken decades to achieve. But even with all the technological leaps humanity has made, an undeniable truth remains. The new world is still far more fragile than we like to admit. Every breakthrough comes with a hidden cost. Climate change makes it easier than ever for viruses from wildlife to jump into human populations. Destroyed forests and disrupted ecosystems create perfect breeding grounds for new pathogens. An aging global population means hundreds of millions of people now belong to the most vulnerable group in any high-fatality outbreak. Megacities home to more than half of the world's population have become ignition points, where a single infection can spread across continents in a matter of days. Yet, the most fragile element is not nature, it is us. Social division after the pandemic made accurate information harder to spread than misinformation. Social media built to connect humanity became fertile ground for fear, doubt, and extremism. And when trust fractures, even the most sophisticated response plans can fail simply because people no longer believe in one another. The pandemic gave us technology, but it did not give us unity. A world stronger in innovation but weaker in trust, that is the greatest paradox of the post-COVID era. And it is also the reason humanity remains vulnerable to the next outbreak, no matter how far we have advanced. Imagine an ordinary morning for the world. Dubai, Singapore, Frankfurt, and Atlanta airports are packed, planes landing non-stop. No one suspects a new pandemic is on its way. At one of these airports, a young traveler steps off a long-haul flight. He has a mild fever, a cough, assuming it's a common flu. He walks through the health checkpoint, leaving behind a microscopic trace inside the global biosurveillance system built after COVID. 4 hours later, in a data center halfway across the world, AI algorithms detect an anomaly, a completely new genetic sequence with signs of spreading faster than SARS-CoV-2. The Global Alert System immediately notifies WHO, the US CDC, Europe's ECDC, and the UAE Pandemic Response Center. The 0 hour of the next pandemic begins. Within the first 48 hours, the world's pandemic radar network activates. High-security laboratories on 3 continents analyze the genetic samples simultaneously. AI simulates thousands of spread scenarios using real mobility data, population density, transportation flows, and epidemiological history. Governments no longer spend weeks debating like in 2020. Emergency protocols created after COVID force immediate action once data crosses the danger threshold. Certain flight routes are reduced, high-risk zones tightened, and hospitals upgraded to maximum alert. By day 7, the virus's genetic code is fully decoded. 3 major biotech firms use mRNA platforms to generate the first vaccine designs within hours. These designs are shared instantly through a global cooperation system created specifically to prevent the chaotic vaccine competition seen in 2021. In 2 to 3 weeks, cities avoid nationwide lockdowns by applying tiered measures. Outbreak zones tighten restrictions while safe areas continue operating. Medical drones, delivery robots, and telehealth systems keep society running without collapsing. Schools switch seamlessly to online learning, no longer stumbling as they did 6 years earlier. By week 6, next-generation vaccines enter mass production. Automated factories recalibrate their production lines, and robots work around the clock to prepare hundreds of millions of doses. Trial data is analyzed in real time by AI, dramatically shortening approval timelines. But the real story isn't only about technology, it's about people. Online, new conspiracy theories surface, claims that the virus is a bioweapon, a political tool, or a method of control. Some reject scientific data entirely. Some governments hide real numbers to avoid political instability. In those places, history repeats almost exactly. Overwhelmed hospitals, endless debates over personal freedom, and protests against public health measures. Technology evolves, but human behavior often repeats the same mistakes. Meanwhile, in nations that truly learned from COVID, the response looks completely different. They communicate transparently, share data clearly, update frequently. Citizens are treated as partners, not subjects. Trust and technology move together, and that becomes the strongest vaccine of all. The outcome of the next pandemic won't be a perfect victory. Some nations will control it with minimal damage, some will fall back into chaos, and many will stand somewhere in between. But one truth remains: viruses can mutate, systems can be upgraded, yet if lessons and trust are not preserved, humanity will always risk walking the very same path it believed it had already escaped. 6 years later, COVID is no longer just a dark chapter in human history. It is the most brutal stress test ever applied to a civilization that believed itself unshakable. It shattered what was fragile, exposed what was weak, and forced humanity to confront a truth it had ignored for decades. That even the modern world, no matter how advanced, can be brought to its knees by something too small to see. Yet, from the moment the world shut down, humanity rediscovered something it had forgotten for centuries: the ability to rise from ruin. We learned to create vaccines in less than a year. We built a global biological radar. We re-engineered supply chains, automated factories, digitized entire nations, and elevated AI to the level of strategic defense infrastructure. None of these advancements came from comfort, they were born from fear. And for that reason, they must never become a source of complacency. Because the next pandemic, whether it arrives in 10 years or 10 months, does not care how advanced we have become. It cares about one thing: whether humanity remains divided as it was in 2020, or if it has finally grown enough to stand on the same side. Technology can save millions of lives, but only trust can save a civilization. The post-COVID world is stronger, faster, smarter, but also more fragile than ever. And the fate of the next pandemic will not be decided in laboratories. It will be decided in how we choose to treat one another. If we remember the old lessons, we will rewrite the future. If we forget them, we will repeat history. COVID was the warning. The next pandemic will be our answer.